When three ambitious thieves set their sights on Clint Eastwood's custom convertible, they have no idea they're about to pick a fight with a Hollywood legend. A single impulsive heist triggers a chain of events that proves age is just a number when it comes to grit, wit, and unbreakable resolve. Clint Eastwood, now 94, stepped out of the driver's seat with the quiet confidence that had defined his decades on screen. Even without the thunderous fanfare of paparazzi, his presence commanded respect. Tall, lean, and dressed in a simple navy blazer over a crisp shirt, he radiated a timeless aura that turned heads. Clint adjusted the jacket draped over his shoulder, his gaze sweeping across the street. The hum of traffic and neon signs flickering overhead suggested a typical night in downtown Los Angeles. But Clint's instincts, honed by years of real-life and on-screen confrontations, nagged at him. He sensed eyes on him, a tension lurking beyond the glare of city lights. He shook off the feeling. It was probably nothing more than typical nightlife energy. In a shadowy alley, three men huddled around a battered black van with tinted windows. Marco, the ringleader with slicked-back hair and a perpetual sneer, peered around the corner. Tony, skinny and jittery, tapped on a handheld device glowing faintly in the darkness. Luis, bigger and bulkier than the other two, flexed his fists in anticipation. Their target glistened under a nearby street lamp, Clint Eastwood's immaculate convertible. "That's it," Marco murmured, nodding toward the sleek machine. "The old man's ride, trust me. It's worth more than our last 3 gigs combined." Tony glanced at him. "You sure about the security system? We can't just smash the window of a car like that. It'll be rigged with alarms up the wazoo." "Relax," Marco shot back, his tone loaded with arrogance. "Nobody's got a system I can't beat. Besides, we've studied that car. It's got some custom setup, but I got a program for everything." Luis cracked his knuckles and eyed the glistening convertible. "He's an old dude," he said, his voice dripping with overconfidence. "I heard he's tough, but come on, he's 94. This job will be a breeze." Meanwhile, Clint made his way into the upscale club, stepping past bouncers who greeted him warmly, ignoring the hushed murmurs of patrons who recognized his iconic silhouette. Inside, ambient music played softly. Polished floors and modern decor contrasted with Clint's unpretentious demeanor. He took a seat at a discreet table in the back, a respectful nod or wave his only acknowledgement to those who recognized him. He was here for a calm evening, not a spectacle. In the distance, the faint beep of Tony's handheld device drifted through the alley. Marco's eyes never left the convertible. He watched Clint's every move until the front doors of the club swallowed the legendary actor. As soon as Clint was out of sight, a slow, predatory smile curved across Marco's lips. "Now," Marco ordered, tone firm. "Tony, jam the alarm. Luis, keep an eye out." Tony placed a small black box on the hood of the thieves' van and typed in a series of commands. A faint hiss, almost inaudible, slipped through the alley. "Done," he whispered. "We've got a 90-second window before the backup system kicks in." They advanced with methodical precision, crossing the street under the cover of passing cars. Marco knelt by the convertible, pulling out a gadget that looked part cell phone, part circuit board. With a confident flick, he began scanning the car's keyless system. The convertible's glossy paint reflected his concentrated face. Inside, Clint felt a twinge of unease, the same itching sense that had pricked at him earlier. He couldn't place it. He took a sip of water, eyes flicking toward the entrance as if expecting trouble. A lifetime of playing watchful sheriffs and unstoppable detectives had honed his ability to read a room. But here, everything seemed normal. He settled deeper into his seat, dismissing the anxiety as paranoia. It was a big city. Any number of things could be setting him off. Besides, he was determined to enjoy this evening. Little did he know the tension wasn't inside the club, but out on the street, swirling around his beloved car like vultures. "Got it," Tony said triumphantly as the convertible's locks clicked. The group exchanged grins. They imagined an easy payday, a theft that would net them a fortune on the black market, especially with Eastwood's name attached to the vehicle. Marco yanked open the driver's door, moved to pop the hood, then paused. "Lift it," he told Luis, stepping back to let his bulky partner pry it open. With a grunt, Luis hoisted the hood. Tony aimed a flashlight at the engine, scanning for additional security modules. Unbeknownst to them, the convertible's main alarm system had indeed been neutralized. But Clint Eastwood, having grown cautious over a lifetime in the spotlight, had installed more than just a standard setup. Hidden compartments, motion sensors, and a silent GPS tracker were all integrated. Tony's device jammed the primary alarm, but a secondary system quietly activated, sending a signal to Clint's phone. Inside the club, Clint's phone vibrated on the table. He glanced down, eyebrows knitting when he spotted the unfamiliar emergency code. He recognized it instantly as a custom alert tied to his car. His blood ran cold for a split second. Then that old, familiar steel set in. He rose swiftly, tossed some cash on the table, and strode toward the exit, pulse thrumming with righteous indignation. Outside, Marco, Tony, and Luis got to work. They rummaged through the interior, cracking open compartments, searching for valuables. Tony found a custom briefcase in the trunk, prying it open with a small crowbar. His eyes lit up at the sight of specialty documents, rare collector's registrations and minted license plates that would fetch a fortune. Luis, stationed as a lookout, spotted a figure emerging from the club. "Hey," he hissed, "someone's coming." Marco shrugged. "We're almost done." The figure drew closer, silhouetted by the neon glow of the club's sign. Another step, and the faint light revealed the angular jaw, the unmistakable gaze. It was Clint Eastwood. He walked with measured steps, his face set in that no-nonsense glare that had intimidated criminals on the silver screen for decades. Except this wasn't a script. This was real, and they had just crossed a line. Luis's bravado wavered. "Is that—" "Shut up," Marco snapped, though his own heart slammed against his chest. "He's old, we can handle this." Clint paused a few feet away from them. No uniformed security in sight, no sirens, just him. A quick glance at the open hood of his convertible confirmed his suspicion. They were stealing from him. "You three should walk away," Clint said softly, his voice cutting through the alley. "While you still can." A tense beat followed. Tony's device beeped ominously, indicating a reactivation of the system. Ignoring it, Marco smirked. "Brave words," he said, brandishing a small knife. "But we're taking this car, old man." Clint's eyes flicked from the knife to Tony's device, then to the custom briefcase under Tony's arm. "You'll regret that," he said, "and it won't take long." Luis shifted, the weight of the big man's presence overshadowed by a creeping sense of dread. He recalled tales of Eastwood's tough guy reputation, stories that blurred lines between myth and reality. But Marco, always hungry for a challenge, lunged forward with the blade, intending to scare Clint. Clint sidestepped with surprising agility. He grabbed Marco's wrist and twisted just enough to send the knife clattering onto the pavement. With fluid grace, he swung his elbow, catching Marco in the shoulder. Marco staggered. It wasn't a wild, adrenaline-fueled strike, but a precise practice move that delivered maximum impact with minimal effort. Luis's eyes widened. Tony, startled, dropped the briefcase. The corners cracked on impact, scattering the contents. From behind clenched teeth, Marco spat, "You'll pay for that!" Clint kept his voice calm, measured. "I don't believe in intimidation. I believe in consequences." Tony picked up the fallen knife, waving it awkwardly, sweat trickling down his temple. "We'll handle him, Marco. Just get the car started." Before Marco could respond, Clint took a single step toward them, his gaze unwavering. "You boys have one last chance to walk away." Luis aimed a punch, powerful but telegraphed, more bluster than skill. Clint swayed aside at the last instant, hooking an arm under Luis's. A shift of weight, a pivot, and the big man toppled. He groaned, wind knocked out of him. Tony, heart pounding, realized the old man wasn't an easy target. "We gotta go," he barked, turning to scramble toward the van. But Marco wasn't ready to give up. Pride stung, he scrambled to his feet, determined to salvage the job. Clint's phone vibrated again, another alert. He cast a quick glance. The convertible's GPS had notified local authorities as part of a silent alarm. Backup was on the way. With the skirmish intensifying, though, he wasn't sure he wanted to wait. Marco, rubbing his bruised wrist, motioned Tony forward again. Tony rushed Clint, knife leading, his breath ragged with fear. Clint sidestepped, delivered a swift strike to Tony's forearm, and the blade rattled onto the ground. Before Tony could react, Clint grabbed him by the collar, eyes piercing. "Go home," he growled. "This isn't worth dying for." Tony's nerve broke. He wriggled free, stumbling over to the battered van. He yanked the door open, shouting for the others. "We're out of time." Luis rose, shaking the dizziness from his head. Spying the open hood of the convertible, he rushed to finish the job anyway, yanking at wires to hotwire the engine, desperation mixing with greed. Marco, furious and in pain, circled behind Clint, looking for an opening. Clint inhaled, drew on every ounce of muscle memory from a lifetime of choreographed fights and real altercations, then whirled. In one smooth motion, Clint grabbed a rag from inside the convertible, flicked it at Marco's face to distract him, and landed a quick jab to Marco's sternum. Marco doubled over, gasping. He'd never expected such force from a 94-year-old. He struggled to draw a breath, panic lighting his eyes. The club's front doors burst open at the sound of the commotion, and a few onlookers spilled out. Some recognized Clint and gawked, unsure if they were witnessing a film scene or real life. Their wide eyes and hushed whispers were testament to how surreal the sight was. Clint Eastwood battling thieves in a darkened street. Luis near the engine froze as he realized a crowd was forming. He cursed under his breath. Tony yelled from inside the van, "Come on, man, move!" Clint's stance never faltered. "You made a bad call," he said, voice rough as gravel. "Stealing from anyone is low. Stealing from me, unforgivable." Luis slammed the hood shut, rage flashing in his eyes. He charged Clint, hoping his sheer size would be enough. Clint braced, stepping aside at the last second. Luis's momentum carried him into the side of the convertible with a dull thud. He howled in pain, sliding to the ground. Seeing both of his partners battered and humiliated, Tony slammed the van door, fired up the engine, and screeched the tires in an attempt to flee. Marco, cursing and rubbing his aching ribs, struggled to his feet. He lunged for the passenger door, while Luis staggered behind them, panting. Clint just watched, chest rising and falling with steady breaths. He didn't chase them. He didn't need to. The silent alarm had done its job. Sirens were growing louder by the second. Red and blue lights danced along the walls of the buildings. "Drive!" Marco screamed, spittle flying from his lips. The battered van peeled out, fishtailing onto the main road. Luis almost didn't make it inside, scrambling with wide eyes. One by one, tires squealed, echoing through the night. Within moments, a patrol car whipped around the corner. Two more followed, forming a blockade. The thieves found themselves pinned at the intersection, cornered like rats. The van's headlights illuminated a dead end of cruisers. Tony slammed on the brakes. In the swirl of confusion, the thieves tried to reverse, but it was too late. Officers poured out, guns drawn, barking orders to shut off the engine. Tony raised his hands in a trembling surrender. Marco cursed under his breath, still cradling his injured wrist. Luis, face pale, realized they were trapped and quietly submitted, opening his door. Back by the convertible, Clint exhaled, massaging his shoulder. A uniformed officer approached him carefully, mouth agape. "Mr. Eastwood," he said, breath hitching in disbelief. "Are you all right? Reports said someone was trying to steal your car." Clint nodded, glancing at his prized vehicle. "I'm fine. The car's fine too, mostly. I'm guessing those idiots won't try that again." The officer, clearly an admirer, took a moment to gather himself. "We've got them in custody. Looks like your alarm system alerted us just in time." "Good," Clint said, keeping it curt. "Thank you." The crowd, once timid, now approached cautiously. Some recognized Clint, snapping pictures with shaky hands. Others simply marveled at the scene, a stolen convertible attempt gone wrong, culminating in the would-be criminals carted away by the police. An older couple who had witnessed parts of the showdown stood near the sidewalk, worry and awe etched on their faces. The woman stepped forward tentatively. "Mr. Eastwood, are you sure you're not hurt?" Clint offered a reassuring nod. "I've dealt with worse on a movie set, but thank you for asking." The man shook his head in amazement. "That was something else. You took them on like you were 30 years old again." A slight twitch of Clint's lips might have been the shadow of a smile. "Sometimes adrenaline does the trick," he said simply, aware of a dull ache where Luis's near collision had grazed him. "And sometimes it's just principle." "Will you press charges?" a reporter asked, suddenly appearing with a camera crew, angling for an interview. Clint's gaze shifted toward the blockade of police cars, lights flashing. The thieves were being cuffed, lined against their battered van. "That's up to law enforcement," Clint said, "but I don't imagine they'll see daylight soon if I can help it." A flicker of recognition passed through the crowd as they realized the cameo of real-life justice playing out. Clint Eastwood had once again embodied the spirit of all those characters who stood up for what was right against impossible odds. Life imitating art. He turned to the convertible, gently running his hand along the driver's side panel, checking for damage. A scratch here, a dent there, nothing too serious. With the adrenaline cooling, he felt each bruise forming under his own skin. But the old adage about Eastwood's toughness held true. He wasn't down for the count. An officer returned, handing Clint a small evidence bag containing the thieves' gadgets. "We'll take everything to the station," he said. "They tampered with your security system, but it looks like you had a backup in place we've never seen before." Clint raised an eyebrow, pocketing the bag. "I did, and it worked exactly how I wanted." In the background, Tony, Luis, and Marco were loaded into patrol cars. Their furious gazes found Clint. Marco spat venomously. "He set us up." Clint met his eyes without flinching. "You set yourselves up. Next time, pick your targets more carefully, though I doubt you'll get another chance soon." The doors slammed shut, muffling the thieves' protests. Clint watched them go, a sense of calm settling in. Age might have slowed his gait, added lines to his face, but it hadn't tamed his spirit. He was still Clint Eastwood, and messing with him was a mistake. A second wave of onlookers began to cluster. Word spread quickly among passers-by and inside the club that something dramatic had unfolded outside. Smartphones recorded videos for social media, capturing the aftermath of a scene that felt ripped straight from an action movie. The difference was that this showdown bore no script, no second takes. "Mr. Eastwood," a younger officer ventured, stepping forward, "may I get your statement?" Clint gave a curt nod. "Sure, let's get this over with." They walked a few steps from the crowd. The officer clicked on a small recorder. "So, you were inside the club when you got an alert on your phone?" "Exactly. My phone's linked to a silent backup alarm in the car. As soon as I saw the code, I knew someone was tampering with it." "And then?" Clint inhaled, recounting the events plainly without flourish. The officer's pen scratched across a notepad, though he occasionally stopped to gaze in awe. The story was almost too sensational to be believed. A Hollywood legend physically confronting 3 criminals by himself. "How many times have you done something like this?" the officer asked, half-jokingly. Clint shrugged. "They got me on camera fending off trouble in a few pictures," he said wryly. "But in real life, it doesn't happen every day. Guess they picked the wrong convertible." The policeman couldn't hide a grin. "Understatement of the year, sir." Finished giving his statement, Clint turned back toward his convertible as the officers taped off the immediate area, collecting evidence. The tension in the air was easing, replaced by an electric sense of awe. A slender man in a suit approached, a manager from the club. "Mr. Eastwood, are you hurt? We have a medic inside if you need anything." Clint rubbed his shoulder. "Might just need an ice pack," he said mildly, "but I'll manage." He answered a few more questions, politely declining a flurry of interview requests from local reporters. Then, with a final wave to the small knot of fans who'd gathered, Clint slipped back into the driver's seat of his convertible. The engine roared to life, that pristine rumble echoing in the night. As he pulled away, the cameras continued rolling, capturing him gliding down the street, a silhouette of stoic resilience. Even from a distance, the convertible was a testament to old-school glamour fused with modern technology. The faint swirl of sirens receded behind him as law enforcement finished up at the scene. Clint drove toward a less crowded stretch of the city, determined to calm his nerves. Adrenaline still coursed through him. His mind replayed the confrontation. Marco's knife, Tony's device, Luis's brute force. For a moment he allowed himself the private acknowledgement that if he'd been even a bit slower, less prepared, the night could have ended very differently. He parked near a small, late-night diner and took a moment to breathe, stepping out for a stretch. The convertible gleamed under a street lamp. A fresh scratch marred the paint, but it only added to the vehicle's story, another chapter in the legend of Clint Eastwood's unwavering stand against those who'd do him wrong. He gazed at the sky, letting the city sounds wash over him. The beep of car horns, the distant rumble of motorcycles, the faint laughter of pedestrians. Amid that urban tapestry, he felt more alive than he had in years. Maybe it was the thrill of having faced down danger again, or maybe it was the satisfaction of standing his ground. He thought of all the roles he'd played, all the times he'd delivered lines about honor, justice, and doing what's right. Tonight, there was no script, just his moral code and a refusal to back down. A soft breeze ruffled his hair. The motion reminded him of how many years had passed since his toughest roles. Yet the grit he'd shown as Dirty Harry, or the unwavering moral compass he'd displayed in countless westerns, still pulsed within him. Age, he mused, might temper the body, but it doesn't have to dull the spirit. He reached into his pocket for his phone, eyes scanning for missed messages. There was a congratulatory text from one of his daughters. News traveled fast. Another from an old friend, simply saying, "Heard you gave some punks a lesson, that's my Clint." A small chuckle escaped his lips. Word indeed had spread quickly. "Those punks will think twice next time," he muttered to no one in particular. Then he slipped the phone away, deciding that a strong cup of coffee might do him good. Inside the diner, he settled into a booth. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with a warm smile, recognized him instantly. Her eyes widened. "I just saw something on social media about you fighting off thieves. That can't be true, can it?" Clint shrugged. "It happened." Shaking her head in disbelief, she handed him a menu. You want coffee? On the house. You've earned it. I'd appreciate that, Clint replied, glancing at the laminated list of dishes. He wasn't especially hungry, but the tension in his chest suggested a warm meal might help him relax. And maybe a bowl of your tomato soup. She nodded, still blinking in amazement. You must have had one crazy night. Let's just say I hope it's the last time I'll be throwing punches at my age. She walked away, leaving Clint alone with his thoughts. The diner was mostly empty, just a lone couple in a corner booth and a pair of truckers at the counter. Quiet country music played softly on the speakers, offering a soothing contrast to the drama he'd just experienced. As he waited, Clint reflected on the ephemeral nature of life. One moment you're enjoying a peaceful evening, the next you're fighting off criminals. He'd never sought out violence, but he'd never shied away from doing what needed to be done. That sense of resolve had guided him through war films, westerns, police dramas, and more importantly, real-life challenges. When the waitress returned, placing the coffee and soup before him, she asked timidly, "What will happen to those guys?" Clint pursed his lips. "Probably go to jail. Maybe they'll learn something. Then again," he trailed off, lifting his spoon, "that's not really my call." She hovered for a moment as though searching for more. When no further explanation came, she gave a polite nod and left him to his meal. Steam rose from the soup. Clint inhaled the comforting aroma, letting the tension ebb with each bite. Outside, headlights swept by, the city carrying on, oblivious to the small drama that had occurred. People might read about it tomorrow or see a brief clip on the news, but life in Los Angeles would move on at its usual hectic pace. Yet for Clint, the night's confrontation was more than a random scuffle. It was a reminder of everything he believed in, standing firm against wrongdoing, protecting what's yours, and never underestimating the power of a determined individual, even one who might seem past his prime. He finished his soup, thanked the waitress, and left some cash on the table. As he stepped outside, the crisp night air welcomed him. The convertible still glistened under the street lamp, a testament to craftsmanship and pride. He slid back behind the wheel, feeling the slight twinge in his shoulder.